Well, welcome to this webinar, Guiding Principles for Promoting Youth Employment. This is the first offering in the Pathways to Employment webinar series, which means we're really going to focus on the ways our postures and our practices and our partnerships can help students with significant disabilities prepare for and connect to the world of work, to find meaningful work that matters to them and to others in their midst, to really flourish in the workplace. And our starting points certainly matter. If we get the first things down right, good outcomes for our students are much more likely to follow. So this session will address a dozen or so core principles that should guide us as we help our students and their families navigate this challenging transition to the workforce. So I hope you will come to recognize the importance of meaningful work for all of our students, and that you'll understand the current employment outcomes for students specifically with those who have significant disabilities. That you'll see the importance of adopting an array of guiding principles, and most of all, that you'll identify ways that you can incorporate these principles into your everyday work. So I suspect most of you watching this webinar can actually speak firsthand to the difference that having a good job makes in your own lives and in the lives of your family members and your friends. And of course, there's the paycheck and all the benefits that an employer might offer. But a good job does much more than provide and promote financial well-being. It also contributes to our sense of accomplishment, our self-worth and independence. It gives us a place to share our strengths and our gifts in valued ways. It helps us to live out our calling. It leads to new friendships and provides resources and connections that can enhance community involvement. A meaningful job can be enriching and even life-giving. And the same array of benefits are true for our students who have significant disabilities. In a series of focus groups and interviews that we did with parents whose daughters and sons with developmental disabilities had already accrued paid work experiences, we asked about the why of work, why that work mattered so much in the lives of their children. And I put their responses on the screen, and they're kind of ordered from those that are most to least emphasized in our work. Work instills pride. It furthers independence. It provides purpose. It contributes to fiscal independence. It introduces valued roles. It sparks joy. It reflects something they love to do. It gets them out of the house, and most parents can affirm that as well. It contributes to a sense of identity. It makes them feel just like anyone else. It provides a place of belonging. It engages and challenges them. It instills a sense of responsibility and promotes overall well-being. It promotes community involvement, and it provides learning opportunities as well. And parents also emphasized the way, as you can see, that working promoted greater self-sufficiency and fostered relationships and enhanced self-worth and provided direction, increased engagement, promoted growth, and led to students flourishing. Do you see how a good job leads to so many other good things? Why does work matter? Well, just reverse the question. Work matters to young people with significant disabilities for the same constellation of reasons that it matters to anyone else. Now, the multiple benefits of working identified in that particular study, I think that may be persuasive for parents who are reluctant to support their family member in pursuing employment because of the worries about the additional income, that it might not be important or needed or even worth the effort. In this particular transition outcome, employment still remains so elusive for so many of our students with significant disabilities. In Illinois, the most recent data indicates that only 9% of adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities who are served by state agencies have paid jobs in the community. That's less than 1 in 10. And states don't bother to collect or report data on whether people are considering these to be good jobs, a fit with their interests or skills, a workplace they enjoy, just whether or not people are working. And this is a number that hasn't changed substantially over the last couple decades. It varies widely across our states. In fact, the national average across states is about 21% employment, but it ranges from as low as 3% in Hawaii to as high as 85% in Washington state. And these variations from state to state, while they're concerning, they actually highlight that we can indeed make a difference. Students with significant disabilities don't vary from state to state. They're not different in one state from the next. And so we start to see that the key factor that really is relevant here may not be the support needs of our students, but rather the attitudes and the expectations that we hold, and the instruction and the support we deliver, and the programs and policies that we adopt. Those are the things that make the difference between students who will transition to the workplace or those who will transition to the couch. And as educators, we are in such a prime position to change this landscape. And we know a thing or two as a field about how to do this well. And so I focused this first session on 12 powerful actions that we can take to put our students in the very best position to connect to a good job in the community. They're things like following their aspirations, remembering our purpose, raising all expectations, individualizing everything, seeing their strengths, prioritizing inclusion, starting early, engaging families, not going it alone, creating hands-on experiences, graduating them with jobs, and collecting meaningful data. And there's certainly others that we could add to this list, but we will return back to each of these in the remaining webinars that make up this Pathways to Employment series. So I'm just going to park for a few moments on each of these guiding principles, and I'm going to start with the first. And I think the first may be the most important. We must be led by the aspirations of young people with significant disabilities. Our starting assumption as practitioners or even as parents must be that there is no separate set of dreams for students with significant disabilities. Our students want the same things as any of their peers would want. They want close relationships, a comfortable and safe place to live, a college degree, involvement in their community, a chance to give something back, friends they can count on, someone to love, a say in their own lives, an influence on others, and a satisfying job, a good job. You see, the presence of a special education label is just not a reliable predictor of people's dreams for their life after high school. So I want you to listen to just a few of the young people with autism or intellectual disability that we spoke with at our own Think Employment Summit, as they responded to a simple question that we've all been asked when we were younger as well. What do you want to be when you grow up? Take a listen.
Becca? Is it Rebecca or Becca?
Rebecca.
Rebecca.
Yes.
Nick, what do you want to be when you grow up?
I want to be a, that's a hard one.
A farmer.
I kind of want to work with animals.
All right, you're gonna look at me to answer, okay?
Okay.
What kind of job do you want?
I want to do it as saw wire.
I would like to be a tour guide when I grow up at a museum.
I want to work at FedEx.
I want to work at Publix and Fieldston Farms.
I like to be a landscaper.
I work for
I want to be a special education teacher.
All right.
How about?
Is that even recorded yet?
Yeah, it's recording.
Oh, God.
It's all right. But like it's not here. Just look at me, okay?
We need to reshoot that then.
I love that video because the answers they give are absolutely ordinary. They're the kind of things you hear from any young people, and they're also probably the things you're hearing from your students as well. Now, maybe all of that sounds a bit anecdotal to you, but the data bear this out too, at least at a national level. The National Longitudinal Transition Study of 2012, which sampled students in all of the special education categories from across the whole country, asked high school students about the goals they held for their early years after graduation. And a striking 95% of youth with autism expect to have a job in early adulthood. And the same is true for 94% of young people with intellectual disability. You see, young people do not have dreams of underemployment or unemployment. They don't aspire to piece rate wages and sheltered workshops. And they don't say that they envision for themselves a lifetime of exclusion from the workforce. They have gifts to bring to the world, and they want to bring it as well. Now, I'm not aware of any Illinois-specific data, certainly, but I wonder what these numbers might look like in your school and among your caseload. Do you know the work-related aspirations of your students? And what steps could you take to discern these goals from students who have complex communication needs or significant cognitive impairments? Does the instruction and the experiences and the supports that you provide aim in these directions? And what would it look like to follow their lead? Well, second, we must remember our purpose. For those of us who are professionals, whether we work in schools or agencies or elsewhere, we have to see equipping young people to achieve these aspirations as our central charge, as a purpose that we pursue. In fact, this is the primary purpose of special education services. I mean, elevating outcomes is one of the chief reasons we send students to school till age 18 or 21 or 22. This becomes apparent when you open up the pages of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Improvement Act. That's, of course, the federal legislation that drives and guides our work, IDEA. Just a few pages in, it indicates the purpose of special education. It says the purpose is to ensure that all children with disabilities have available to them a free, appropriate public education that emphasizes special education and related services, and here's the key part, designed to meet their unique needs and prepare them for future education, employment, and independent living. To prepare them for further education, which is a pathway to work, for employment, which is the destination of work, and independent living, which is ultimately made possible by work. This isn't the purpose for some students with disabilities, but for all, including those with significant disabilities. And that's why transition is really defined as a coordinated set of activities for a child with a disability that's designed to be within a results-oriented process that's focused on improving the academic and functional achievement of the child with a disability and to facilitate the child's movement from school to post-school activities. It's a results-oriented process. And it begs the question, what are the results? All that to say is that one important barometer of the quality and the effectiveness of what we do as teachers and school systems is the extent to which young people with significant disabilities actually attain the outcomes they aim toward. In other words, the success of our work isn't judged simply by what we write down on an IEP or a transition plan. It's not merely by the services and supports that we plan to deliver, but instead by the degree to which the employment goals that students with disabilities have for life after high school actually materialize. In other words, any sort of compliance mindset has to give way to an outcomes mindset. We have all seen too many beautifully crafted IEPs and transition plans that are just never implemented in practice. Written plans that kind of pass muster, but they lead to someone's couch. And we've all seen fully compliant transition plans that never actually lead to a better life. It turns out that mere compliance almost never leads to good outcomes, and we have to remember our purpose here. Third, we have to work to raise all expectations. Our own expectations have to match the aspirations of our students, and I'd argue they actually have to exceed them. You see, the most powerful force in changing transition and other outcomes may just be the expectations that educators and employers and parents and other professionals hold. The history of the field of special education has shown this over and over. When people held expectations that others thought were impossible, things began to change. And you see, we're having the conversations that we're having now because of past expectations. Our expectations still matter right now. More than any other factor that I've studied in my own research, we found that it is expectations that predict employment outcomes. Let me illustrate with a few findings from our own research. Let's take parent expectations. In our studies, we found that young adults with developmental disabilities whose parents expected them to obtain work after graduation, way back in high school when they expected this, those students were 5 times more likely to have paid community employment within 2 years after graduation. And how about educator expectations? Well, we found that high school students with significant disabilities who had teachers who expected them to hold down a job, they were 15 times more likely to obtain that paid job in the community. You see, throughout the literature, expectations consistently emerge as of foremost importance. And I imagine the very same true is true for your own expectations as leaders and as professionals. Well, why is it? Why are expectations so important? It's not simply because we have an expectation. It's because they actually change behavior. Our expectations shape experiences. And so helping families and our colleagues to grasp a vision of kind of the good life, that changes the trajectories of our young people. It changes what they're taught and where they're taught and with whom they're taught. And when we expect our graduates with significant disabilities to contribute their gifts in the workplace, it changes how we design and deliver our services. It changes who we pursue partnerships with. It changes where we allocate our funding and our staffing and our time. But the reverse is true too. Experiences actually shape expectations, don't they? I mean, it kind of goes both ways. So we've got to find ways to support our students to have success in areas where other people thought would be impossible or implausible, whether that's in general education courses or hands-on work experiences or other inclusive community activities. All of these kind of experiences start to help parents and maybe others in the community catch a first glimpse of what might be possible when their son or daughter is provided the right opportunities and supports and encouragement. You see, real work for real pay should become the first option in the minds of educators and service providers and employers and community members and families and community leaders and the public at large. Indeed, every student with a significant disability in Illinois should hear the message from an early age and from multiple sources, the message that they have something of value to contribute in the workplace. So when we look at the transition plans we craft, do they reflect high expectations? And what are the expectations that you personally hold as an educator? Those expectations matter. Well, fourth, individualization must be a hallmark of transition programming. Students with significant disabilities are incredibly diverse in their needs and their strengths and their preferences and their interests, even if they're served under the same special education category. In fact, there are no two students who are likely to pursue the very same post-school pathways or experience the very same challenges or needs or have this very same talents and strengths or require the very same supports and assistance or even have the same dreams for adulthood. And so we can't think of transition services as this kind of one-size-fits-all endeavor or approach it from a categorical perspective. Well, students with autism need fill in the blank, or all students with intellectual disability should fill in the blank. Instead, careful assessment and person-centered planning, those things are needed to ensure the instruction and experiences students receive are tailored in ways that address their individualized needs. We value our students when we view them as individuals, people known by their names, not by their labels, talked about as individuals rather than only as members of a group. We seem to struggle to do this, frankly, in our approaches to transition planning. So ask yourself, does each IEP or transition plan actually look personal? Is it different from every other student in the class or in your school? And are we fitting individuals into existing transition or employment programming, or are we trying as best we can to design our programs and supports around each individual student? We must strive to individualize everything that we do. Well, one way of, I would say, accenting the I in the IEP involves seeing our students' strengths. And this seems so obvious that it might not seem even worth mentioning. But I think this stands in sharp contrast with how the world sees our students and even sometimes how we approach their education. Do we see each student as a bearer of talents and gifts and strengths that the community needs to receive? Do we know what those gifts are? And do we communicate them well to others? You see, this is so important because many in our community really struggle to see people first and foremost as having strengths and assets and positive qualities that would be needed in the community. And I'm more and more convinced that part of changing employment and other transition outcomes has to involve changing our introductions. And then forging community connections, that requires a different way of introducing the students that we support. Think about how we so often talk about and write about people with labels of Down syndrome or intellectual disability or even autism, all within our professional circles. It's almost always in terms of what someone cannot do or struggles to do. And I put these definitions up on the screen because we define by deficit. We diagnose based on difference. But that single story about a student, that ends up flattening this very rich portrait of who they are. And this narrow view has inadvertent consequences in transition. For example, when an employer considers the question, well, what would a youth with autism have to contribute to this business? Or a coworker is wondering, how do we support a student with intellectual disability in our workplace? If all they have to work from is an image of what a person with that label can't do, well, that makes for a really challenging introduction. You see, it's hard to envision a place in a community for someone only on the basis of what people cannot do or struggle to do. And how we introduce people certainly matters. And yet our students also have enviable qualities, right? They possess an array of talents and skills. They have positive traits and qualities and virtues. They have interests and passions that can connect them to others. And they enrich the lives of others in myriad ways. So how many businesses would benefit from hiring someone with qualities like honesty and persistence and optimism and diligence? And how many coworkers would be eager to develop a friendship with someone who's funny or thoughtful or joyful? And on and on and on. We've actually incorporated this point into an awareness campaign in our state and actually now all around the country. It's one we call Hire My Strengths. And it happens every October during Disability Employment Awareness Month. And it simply makes the point that connections to the workplace aren't facilitated by knowing all of the things a student cannot do, but instead by becoming fluent in all the strengths that they have to offer. The best forms of transition assessment and person-centered planning that I know of strive to pinpoint and grow students' strengths and then figures out who in the community needs exactly those contributions. When we come to know people for their gifts, we can then consider where in our community are those gifts most needed. And then we support our students really well in those contexts. Well, 6, we should prioritize inclusion. And I want you to go back to your own memories of middle school and high school and think about the breadth of classes and clubs and extracurricular activities and service learning opportunities and all the other programs that you took part in. And then the skills and the relationships and the goals that you developed all along the way that prepared you for adulthood. The ways your aspirations were shaped by the kids with whom you spent time. Those kinds of activities provide our students with motivating context for discovering their interests and strengths and preferences. They create new opportunities to affiliate with peers and access social support. They foster a sense of belonging and value within the school community. And they also promote acquisition of important skills for the workplace and for lifelong enjoyment. For example, most high schools offer one or more of the following career development experiences: career interest assessments, tours of colleges and technical schools, job shadowing programs, interviewing or resume writing practice, speakers brought in from local businesses, career exploration courses, college fairs or college days, tours of local businesses and industries, career or job counseling, career aptitude assessments, apprenticeship programs, paid or unpaid internships, job fairs and career days, tech prep programs, career or job resource centers, written career plans for students, cooperative education programs, school-based enterprises and businesses, job placement services for our students, and mentorship programs with employers. This is in addition to the array of career and technical education and vocational courses that your high school might actually offer as well. So we know that participation in extracurricular clubs and school-sponsored groups and volunteer and service learning experiences and other community activities, those provide an additional context for helping our students develop this kind of repertoire of lifelong skills and resume building experiences that can ultimately be really valuable in their pursuit of work. And such broader involvement in school and community life also gives students with significant disabilities this forum for discovering and deepening their interests and their strengths and preferences, for meeting new peers, and for learning everyday life skills in authentic environments as well. And yet so many students with significant disabilities remain isolated from so many of these ordinary inclusive experiences. So establishing a pattern of full participation in typical activities throughout middle school and high school, that starts to establish this trajectory of inclusion well into adulthood. And the research really does bear this out. Early inclusion predicts later inclusion, and early segregation almost ensures later segregation. So we've got to begin this process of transition planning early, and addressing employment early in students' educational careers. Certainly in high school, but that also extends back to middle school and sometimes even earlier into elementary school. Now, formal transition planning doesn't begin till 16, but actually preparation for the world of work begins even earlier. And so think about your own progression of learning about and preparing for the world of work. It's this pathway of career and industry awareness that moves to career exploration, to career preparation, and then to career training. In other words, we go from learning about work to learning for work and then learning through work. That's that early progression that extends all throughout. So you might think about, how do you encourage families to have their children with disabilities help with chores or other household responsibilities, or to learn to manage their own money, or to volunteer in their community. As a family, encourage them to have conversations around the dinner table about their child's job interests and goals, or point out different job possibilities when they're out spending time in the community, so students understand and become familiar with this world of work and the possibilities that are out there. You see, the transition to adulthood is really an ongoing process. It starts as early as appropriate, and it can help give students with significant disabilities a real jump start on their future. Well, that leads right into our 8th point, that we have to find winsome ways of engaging the families of the students we serve. This is increasingly emphasized within the transition literature as a best practice. We know that families are often lifelong supports for their daughters and sons with significant disabilities. They know their children in a way that no one else can. And their support and their engagement, or their absence of support and engagement, we know that has a profound impact on the trajectories of our students into the world of work or to somewhere elsewhere altogether. So families can provide really important insights into the employment preparation of their children with disabilities. Given their long-term relationships and their lifelong supports, these parents and siblings often understand the child's interests and preferences and strengths and needs in ways that educators and adult services providers we might not. And so parents could also identify potential barriers that could impact the likelihood of future employment for their children. And they often have connections in the community that can help be the key to finding and maintaining a job. But families often express uncertainty about the future. They worry about what lies ahead. And the extent to which parents are familiar with information and local resources and community programs that could support their child with disabilities transition to the workforce, well, that ultimately impacts their later access to those supports. And so engaging families often involves teaching them about what's available in their community. For example, in one of our projects, we found that 57% of parents said they were not at all familiar with local or state resources related to employment and vocational supports. Another 1/4 said they were only a little familiar. And similar levels of unfamiliarity were evident in other transition domains as well: post-secondary education, independent living, recreation, and many others. So reflect on the ways that you're already working to involve families in transition planning and in transition preparation, and in learning about the opportunities that are available to them after the school bus stops coming. They can be such important allies and advocates throughout this entire process. And 9th, you shouldn't go it alone. Schools are mandated to provide transition services, but they need strong partners to support this transition to employment. It's simply too much for a single teacher to try to put together all the pieces for the breadth of students that they serve. You need good partners and supports from outside of the classroom and well beyond your school as well. This becomes really evident when we look at the constellation of barriers that parents say can stand in the way of their child with significant disabilities from obtaining community jobs. There are barriers within our communities, such as transportation and attitudes and job opportunities. There are barriers within families, including limited knowledge or low expectations or logistical challenges. There are challenges related to the quality and accessibility of our service systems. And there are school issues related to instruction and communication and training. And there are our complexities, of course, related to the supports and attitudes of the local workplaces and the broader community. And of course, our students vary so widely in the extent to which they've already developed the skills and attitudes and mindsets and behaviors that will lead to success in the workplace. So when you look at this all together, it really means we need partners in our community, among families, among service providers, in our schools, and in workplaces if we're going to have a real shot of changing the employment landscape. So don't be daunted by these barriers. There are many, many people in your midst who can help within and beyond the school. I put just a few of these partners on your screen. Career and technical educators, general educators, school psychologists, related services providers, guidance counselors, school administrators, adult agencies and service providers, employers, post-secondary programs, civic groups and leaders, community groups and their leaders, families, and many, many, many more. So developing strong linkages to needed services and supports that are available beyond the school, that's a real essential part of our coordinated services that are mandated within IDEA and are considered best practice. For example, transition plans should articulate how the involvement of vocational rehabilitation counselors and employment agencies and residential providers and mental health services and behavioral support programs and college programs and others, how all those things can facilitate the student's movement to his or her desired post-school activities. In fact, IDEA requires schools to, this is just a quote from the law, invite to the IEP meeting a representative of any potential participating agency that's likely to be responsible for providing or paying for transition services. So don't go it alone. And 10th, find or create hands-on experiences for your students. You see, the most valuable career development experiences for our students with significant disabilities are usually those that are hands-on and that mirror real-life experiences. Our students usually struggle to generalize the skills they learn in one setting to the actual settings in which they're needed. And this is especially true in the context of work. Despite our best efforts, we can't replicate the learning of work and social-related skills in a self-contained classroom. There's no way to simulate the pacing and the demands and the social requirements and the routines of a typical job in an atypical setting. So look for places and spaces where your students can try out real deal experiences. This is often done through work-based learning or community-based instruction or other off-campus experiences. The thing is, we want to connect our students to jobs before they graduate. And the best of all hands-on experiences, it involves finding a paid job in the community before graduation. Now, I'll say more about the importance of this in other webinars in the series, and I'll also talk more about the practices and the partnerships that make this possible. But for now, let me just make this simple point. Early paid work experiences change the trajectories of our students. In one of our projects and studies, we examine the factors that best predict community employment for students with severe disabilities during the first 2 years after they leave high school. It turns out that youth with significant disabilities who worked in a paid community-based job while they were still in school, well, those students were 2.5 times as likely to be working within 2 years after exiting high school. And other studies and reviews bear this out as well. And I know this might seem like a daunting task, but it really is within your reach as a school to make these experiences more normative. There are transition programs around the state, around the country that have set as their goal connecting every one of their students with disabilities to at least one paid job before graduation. So paid work is a pretty typical experience for most high school students without disabilities. That should be true for students with significant disabilities. If youth are saying they want it, then the purpose of special education is to provide it. And improving employment outcomes, as we talked about earlier, is part of our charge. It's the investment we need to find ways of making. And remember, you don't have to go it alone. There are agencies and community partners who share this goal in common. So pre-vocational experiences are not the same as actual vocational experiences. And the investments we make before graduation will reap many, many benefits after graduation. So graduate your students with a rich resume of actual employment experiences. Well, finally, I want to make sure that we are collecting meaningful data along the way. We need to know whether our practices and our partnerships are actually leading to better outcomes. We need a way to gauge our success and to guide any course corrections. Do you know the outcome data for your district or for your school? And what's telling you? What is it telling you about how to move forward or how to move differently in some way? As the great Yogi Berra said, if you don't know where you're going, you might not get there. And so we need to set clear goals, and then we need to track whether those employment goals are actually attained for our students. Of course, meaningful means much more than simply tracking employment rates, right? Yes, it's good to know whether our graduates are obtaining jobs, but it's equally important to know whether those jobs are satisfying. Do the jobs offer the right supports or the right hours or satisfactory pay or adequate benefits or opportunities for advancement, alignment with their interests, right? The right on-the-job supports for students or interactions with great coworkers. Is it a job they love or is it a job they dread? So I put up on the screen some of the markers of meaningful work as have been identified by parents of youth and young adults with significant disabilities. Things like having sufficient number of hours, the availability of adequate supports, responsibilities matching their abilities, an environment that's safe, the inclusivity of the workplace, the sense of community, coworkers who are kind and helpful, an environment that's supportive, the provision of a living wage, a match with their interests, opportunities for social relationships, a structured environment, opportunities for career growth and like-minded coworkers, appropriately challenging tasks, the predictability of tasks, accessibility transportation-wise, and you could probably add many, many more to this list based on your own experience in the workforce. But it also means tracking progress along the way. What tells you that your students are acquiring the right skills and the necessary knowledge and the important dispositions and the critical experiences that are preparing them well for the world of work? Good data should guide us in all of these various areas. And I hope that that's something that's already part of your work with students, that you're collecting meaningful data, that you're reflecting on those data, and you're using those data to affirm the direction you're going or to help you course correct in new and different ways. Our students need that kind of data-driven planning and instruction and guidance to put them in the best position to enter the world of work and to thrive in the world of work. Well, there you go. It's a dozen or so guiding principles that should permeate our practices. So as you think about transition in your own district or school or classroom, are there areas in which things are already going well? Are there areas which you could do things better or differently? And take the time to reflect on where you go next. And do that against these dozen guiding principles. Are you following your students' aspirations? Are you remembering our purpose as special educators? Are you raising all expectations, including your own? Are you individualizing everything you do so that the work you're doing looks different for each student because each student looks different for this work? Do you see their strengths and do you communicate them to a watching world and to employers? Are you prioritizing inclusion so that early inclusion leads to later inclusion? We can't prepare students for community jobs if their entire lives are separate from everyone else in that community. Are we beginning early and thinking about transition by age 14, but earlier than age 14? And to do that, we've got to engage our families, to see them as vital partners and contributors and informants to this work all throughout. Are we not going it alone? Are we looking for people and partners in our community that can come alongside us in this shared endeavor of elevating employment outcomes? Are we creating hands-on experiences for our students so that they're getting real life, real deal actual work experiences where they can truly discover what they love about working, where they love to work, and the skills and knowledge they need to build upon? And then are we graduating them into jobs so that every student before the last school bus arrives has already had extensive paid work experience, so that there may be possibilities of actually transitioning that job into a post-school job as well? And finally, are we collecting meaningful data along the way? Do we know what our students' goals are? Do we know what progress they're making? Do we know whether what we're doing is leading to better outcomes? All of these matter immensely as we think about forging a path to employment. So I hope this first session has stirred your own thinking about really what matters most when it comes to supporting the transition to adulthood, and particularly the transition to the workplace for students with significant disabilities. I just want to thank you for your work on behalf of youth and young adults with disabilities in your communities and all across Illinois. It's the work that matters immensely, and we want to make sure that students are connected to work that is meaningful for them as well. So thank you for your work. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the sessions in this series, because collectively they provide a roadmap to leading more young people with disabilities to the job of their dreams. So thank you.